the third part of my lecture, right? And let's start from the function of money again, right? Medium of exchange, unit of account, and store of value, right? I said Asian words of money has more to do with medium of exchange. 돈다, 돈, 돌아요. It's like a circulating around the economy, right? People exchange money, but in Western, European culture, it seems like it has to do more with the store of value because monitoring money, right? Monitor this because it has such a precious value in it, in this metal, right? Libra pondo, like which turned out to be pound of British, right? How heavy is this, right? We have to measure it using the scale, right? Storage of value through this metal is an important thing. Now the textbook is much more Eurocentric, okay? So that it talks about the gold standard and then this kind of bimetallism and this kind of things as a starting point, right? Evolution of international monetary system is discussed, right? Bimetallism was before 1875 and it moved down to classical gold standard era until First World War, after First World War, and then before the end of Second World War was there. And then afterwards, they talk about the Bretton Woods system until 1972 when I was born, yeah. And then the flexible exchange rate regime afterwards until these days. But let's start from the bimetallism, right? So metal is used for money, right? And banking, I would say. But before that, right? The word bank in Europe, that comes from Italian word banco, right? B-A-N-C-O. That's meaning bench, where merchants sat to count money, right? You see this picture over here in the Middle Ages, right? These are the merchants counting the money like that, right? And then not only that, the benches and then this kind of cafe kind of things were frequently used for the businessmen and bankers. And one of them turned out to be Lloyd's of London, which is the insurance market these days. That Lloyd's of London actually started as just like a Starbucks and coffee shop, right? Where insurers or gamblers with a lot of money came there and talked about the risky projects, risky ships, and betting on whether their ships would be going shipwreck or something during the spice trade or something to the America or Asia, right? And people bet their money on this one, which turned out to be an insurance scheme later on. Anyway, so banco, bench, bank, all these kind of things are there. And then the bank in Asia, in contrast, right, is called 은행 or 인항. 은행 is Korean terminology. Chinese character is there, right, for you. And 인항 is Chinese character pronunciation. And what about Japanese pronunciation? Ginko. Meaning it means the place where the silver goes. Again, the money circulates, and then 은행 is the place where the money goes, right? In Asia, money has more connotation of circulation or motion of this money. And if you think about Ginza, which is the most expensive financial district of Tokyo, its Chinese character is silver seed, right? Silver seed. This is a place where the government used to mint silver coins in Japan. Not gold coins, by the way, silver coins. That's why Ginza was named as such. Asia, we had more of a silver standard. China especially, and Japan as well, right? Japan has some key mixture between these two, gold and silver, a little bit, but China definitely was silver standard. How about Europe? Both gold and silver were used as money, and that leads us to the discussion of bimetallism before 1875. Bimetallism was a double standard in the sense that both gold and silver were used as money. Some countries were on the gold standard, like Britain, some on the silver standard, and some on both. Both gold and silver were used as an international means of payment, and the exchange rates among currencies were determined by either their gold or silver content. Then gold versus silver. If you have a choice, if you have gold and silver both at the time in your country and yourself, right? Gresham's law holds, right? Gresham's law says what? Says that the least valuable metal is the one that tends to circulate. Okay. For example, you have gold coin and silver coin, $1, $1. Okay. But you know that gold is more precious, right, compared to silver, even though it's printed as $1 in both coins, right? But you know, and everybody knows, gold is more precious. Which one would you use as a payment when you purchase a coffee? Gold or silver? Out of your pocket into somebody else's pocket? Of course, silver, because I want to keep my precious metal into myself, right? Within my vault. So what happens in the money market, right? In this economy, gold will disappear into everybody's vault. Silver will dominate and be circulating everywhere. That's Gresham's law. Okay. Suppose that you were a citizen of Germany during the period when there was a 20 German mark coin made of gold and 5 German mark coin made of silver. Okay. If gold suddenly unexpectedly become much more valuable than silver, which coin would you spend if you wanted to buy a 20 mark item? And which would you keep? Obviously, silver. Less precious metal will be more popularly used in the market. Okay. In Korean terminology, we say 악화가 양화를 구축한다. Bad currency expels good currency out of it. Okay. That's Gresham's law. Now, that's bimetal era, right? Before we start to talk about the classical gold standard, right, we need to talk about the Industrial Revolution a little bit. And the interesting thing is 17th century Europe, especially in Great Britain, they had Industrial Revolution for the first time. Okay, development of James Watt's the steam engine, right? Unlike horsepower or anything, right? They now have much more stronger power coming from the machines. Together with it, they were able to generate powers. Also, electric power helped them to mechanize all these manufacturing process, especially their textile business, clothing, right? In England and Scotland, there are a lot of sheep, right, hanging around on the grazing and the mountain. What do? Well, not only kill them and eat the mutton, but they can cut those the hairs and then use it for their garment business, right? Wools are there, right? So why don't we use machines in producing this kind of garments instead of using our hand labors? That drastically lowered down the production cost amazingly, so that they were able to produce it cheaply and then compete in European market with a fraction of product price, right? Rothschild was the guy, Nathan Rothschild, that you see on the left-hand side of this corner, that noticed this opportunity and said, he moved from his father stationed in Frankfurt, Germany, and said, well, I'm going to do my business of trading these garments, buying cheaply in Britain and selling it in France or Europe, continental Europe. He earned tons of money by doing this kind of business, and he was stationed in London. By accumulating money with this kind of garment business or merchandising business, he naturally set up bank in London later on, and started to trade golds and then all kinds of financial products over there, and supporting the government of Great Britain. Okay, now what happened in the continental Europe in terms of politics? It was, very violent and turmoil, tumultuous period, 17th century or 18th century. Largely, the continental Europe was having a complicated situation because of religious reformation and wars, right? Also, the French Revolution, okay, French Revolution, most dramatic one. Napoleonic Wars was taking place in continental Europe. The concept or ideology of democracy instead of living under the control of absolute power monarchs and noble people, right? Ancien regime, they say, ancien regime. They revolted and then did the revolution, like that, the one that you see on the middle picture. And then the French Revolution took place, and then it was spreading all around Europe. Napoleonic War was carrying this kind of ideology to the neighboring countries. So, thinking about the monarchs and kings of Habsburg or Spain or the countries that is surrounding France, what must have they thought? The monarchs, right? They were frightened because their people, right, were how do you say, infected in terms of today's terminology, maybe. They were influenced a lot by this French Revolution armies, right? They were spreading this idea. Hey, you guys, revolt against a monarch, and then you have to realize establish your republic somehow. So monarchs were against this Napoleon, and whereas the Napoleon was just their force was conquering all around the Europe. But Britain, they were afraid of, not afraid of the democracy itself, but they were afraid of any superpower forming inside the continental Europe. British idea was always like check and balance, right? So that they wanted to, how do you say, stand against this Napoleonic movement. And that's why the Duke of Wellington from Britain was fighting against Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo. And this Battle of Waterloo, that is in today's Luxembourg area or Belgium area, right? There, the Wellington had to finance their own army forces. The war is kind of a project for country level, right? You need money to mobilize these guys. Where would you raise your capital? How would you raise your capital to mobilize these guys? You need gold to do that. Well, there came Rothschild with the plenty of gold and say, I'm going to carry those gold for you because we have a huge network, a secret network inside Europe, 5 different brothers spread around Paris, Frankfurt, and Naples, and things like that. So I can do that for you. So that's how they combined the forces together and then beat Napoleonic forces over there and finished their Napoleon's era. Okay. Anyway, so and that's how the Rothschild became such a powerful figure in London's market and in politics as well. And together with it, they were supporting not only British forces, but also those continental European force against Napoleonic War, Napoleon's, right? Metternich and then his forces were backed up by this Rothschild family. Now, that drives us to the wave of first wave of in textbook that says classical gold standard, starting from 1875 until 1914. This is during this period. In most major countries, gold alone was assured of unrestricted coinage, and there was two-way convertibility between gold and national currencies at a stable ratio. Gold could be freely exported or imported. We call it bullion, but the exchange rate between two countries' currencies would be determined by their relative gold contents. And Great Britain was the superpower or major power, I would say, in 19th century Europe. This was the earliest country to experience industrial revolution, by which they were able to do some mass production of woolen clothes and things like that, textile industry, and exporting to Europe. And there was a lot of trade imbalance, right? But at the same time, the Britain imported so much tea and spices from China. China, remember, they had silver standard, right? And they believe that they are the center of the world. And then the barbarians from the West, you are buying our tea, so you pay silver to me. And the Europeans or British may say, I have more gold as well, but Chinese will say just silver over here. So, well, that's the payment mechanism they had to do it. Okay, silver, only pay with the silver, right? So, some of you may have question, why gold standard instead of silver standard in Europe in this era, right? Because of this tea effect, right? In Britain, you see a picture, right, over here of a family that is enjoying the tea time in Great Britain, right? A lot of imports from China, tea and silver was draining out, okay, draining out. And they almost ran out of silver, they say, some people say. Now use gold instead. Gold was more abundant in the UK, and that's a major reason why the gold standard started to take place starting from Great Britain. And they were the dominant power because they had industrial revolution in the first place. And then they imposed it to continental Europe, influenced it by and by. So, talking about gold standard, for example, if the dollar is pegged to gold at the 30 US dollar per ounce of gold, and the British pound is pegged to gold at 6 pounds per 1 ounce of gold, it must be the case that the exchange rate is determined by the relative gold content. So the equation simply tells us that 1 pound should be 5 US dollars, right? Because they are having equivalent gold value, 1 ounce of gold, right? Now, another example told in the textbook is this. Let me see if I can expand this. Hello, right, bigger picture. Now, if you think about this, an ounce of gold is here, right? And then you have two different countries. One is Britain and the other is France. French franc is used over there, right? For ounce of gold, right? Ounce of gold, it is sold for 6 pounds in London, whereas in France it is sold for 12 French francs, okay, per ounce. By this, you can see it? Yes. By this, you can immediately compute, right, the exchange rate between British pound and French franc, which is 2 French francs per pound. You see this triangular relation? What if, okay, this is a fair exchange rate, by the way, 2 French francs per pound. One question is, what if, right, for some reason, the exchange ratio between pound and franc is not 2, but 1.8 French franc per pound, okay, for some reason. Let's suppose it. And suppose that you need 1,000 French francs because you may have to travel from Great Britain to Paris, okay? You need 1,000 francs. What would you do? The first way is just directly converting using 1.8 exchange rate. Would you do that? Given that you know that the gold and the two currencies relation is set up like this, right? Would you do that? If you do this, then how much of a pound would you need? Let's say first way, 1,000 French francs divided by the exchange rate in the market, 1.8 francs per pound. So that will be cancel, pound, I would say 555.56 pounds. Okay, you need to spend 555.56 pounds to get 1,000 French francs if you go this way. But you have gold way, okay, because this is gold standard, okay? Now, if that is the case, how much of gold that you need first to get 1,000 French francs? That's something you have to compute first. And then how much of a pound do you need to get this amount of gold is a second stage computation. So the second way of doing it, let me use another color over here. The second way is, first of all, 1,000 French francs, and then divide it into 12 French francs per ounce, right? Then cancel out, and this guy means 83.34 ounces of gold you need, right? Can you see it? Right. Then the second stage, this is the first stage, second stage, what would you do? 83, okay, 0.34, right, times how much of pound that you need, 6 pounds per ounce. Cancel, so that you're going to need only 500 pounds, okay, 500 pound of British money, right? So which one is cheaper for you? This one versus that one? Obviously, the second approach, gold approach, right? So in gold standard, in any of a mispricing of the exchange rate will be corrected by this gold, right? By this, you will try to what? Purchase gold more over here in London, and then sell more in France, so that the exchange ratio between these two will be adjusted, so much so that the exchange ratio between the pound and French franc will get back to 2 French francs per pound relations. All right. Yes, it was highly stable exchange rates under the classical gold standard, provided an environment that was conducive to international trade and investment, right? Any misalignment of exchange rates and international imbalances of payment were automatically corrected by the price-specie-flow mechanism. We call this price-specie mechanism, that is using the gold as an intermediate medium. Suppose Great Britain exports more to France than France imports from Great Britain, which was exactly happening in 18th century, right? And pretty much 19th century as well. This cannot persist under gold standard. Net export of goods from Great Britain to France will be accompanied by a net flow of gold from France to Great Britain. This flow of gold will lead to a lower price level in France and at the same time a higher price level in Britain. The resultant change in relative price levels will slow exports from Great Britain and encourage export from France. So because of the gold, you use it in the between as a pure net export and import situation, so that the trade balance will be seesawing, so that it will eventually come down to the equilibrium level again. Okay, that's the idea of gold standard mechanism. But that needs some orchestrator in between, okay, so that the two countries will listen to and abide by this gold standard rule. One country says, screw it, I'm not going to do gold standard. No, screw you. And then the other countries will get screwed as well, right? Somebody in between has to take those two governments and say, you listen to, this, you follow this gold standard rule somehow in a coordinated way. We need an orchestrator somehow. And the international monetary system is about this kind of orchestrator, right? Who worked as an orchestrator at that era? There was a concert of Europe, okay? Largely driven by Metternich of Vienna, and then this is more of a political leader in that era that was uniting this kind of monarchs in different European countries, and then started to coordinate their ways of recovering, restoring their dynasties, and then getting back to this conservative era before the beginning of democratization or something. So all these governments were trying to coordinate, not only politically, but also in terms of economy and then their monetary system wise. They were trying to stabilize it somehow. And the Rothschild family was playing the central role over there by working in financial part of this world. And that went until the beginning of the First World War. But people usually divide this concert of Europe into the first part, which ended in 1870, which is Metternich's era, and then after 1870, which is Bismarck's era. The Preußen ruler, right? The premier, Bismarck. And then it went until the beginning of First World War. And during this period, the continental Europe was hot in terms of imperialism and then building up nation states, which means for established countries like France, they were busily expanding other colonies like America or Africa to expand their empires. They were competing for that. Because of to realize their scale economy for their business people, right? And then for other countries, their nationalistic sentiment was very high, so that this Bismarck, this kind of guy said, well, German people need German country instead of 200 different countries, quarreling against each other. So unite the force, and then the same nation. Same communication or language, we can build up strong country somehow and compete against the French Empire or British Empire. That was his idea. And this kind of movement was very wild over there. And one of the interesting part of the conflict coming from this nation state idea was this disputed area called Alsace and Lorraine. Alsace and Lorraine, I don't know if any of you are from this part of the Europe, right? But Alsace and Lorraine is a very beautiful place sitting between France and Germany. This is France territory right nowadays, but it has a famous place called Colmar. I have been there with my family. Perhaps one of the most memorable, places and beautiful places that we've ever been. Okay, sweet memories are there. Anyway, Alsace and Lorraine is this kind of place that you see on this picture. Very beautiful. The interesting thing is, this is French region, but the construction of the building is completely German style, right? German style. So it's a mixture of two different cultures, okay? Mixture of two different cultures. But why do I say this over here? Because this place is famous for its iron ore. And in 19th century, Preußen, which is supposed to be Germany later on, they were hungry for iron ores because they had enough of coal mine in their own territory. Ruhr and Saar, they have a lot of coal mines, okay? He said, now we need iron ore. And then ThyssenKrupp is a brand name of our elevators in my apartment, by the way. But you're going to see a lot of ThyssenKrupp kind of logos there, some in places, elevators. But Krupp is the one that produced the steel. And to produce steel, they need iron ore. But Germany had usually the coal mine. So this guy tried to get this piece of land from France so much so that after defeating France in the Franco-Prussian War, Germany took over this Alsace-Lorraine. So this Colmar place once was occupied by Germany, okay? But after First World War, right? Obviously Germany lost that war, and then France recovered this land, reclaimed this land. And then as time went by, German leaders, were still putting their eyes on this land, so that when Hitler beat France in Second World War, they took over this piece of land back to Germany. Okay, and then after the Second World War, when the Germany was defeated, France reclaimed and then took it over to France back again. So this piece of land was busily snatched by two different countries, back and forth, back and forth. This became a source of fighting a lot because of these natural resources. Anyway, so blood and iron was the policy that the German chancellor was going after. So during this era of gold standard, right? Gold standard. What happened in America? They were experiencing civil war until 1865, and afterwards they were going through an uninterrupted capitalism called laissez-faire capitalism, and people call it the robber baron age, right? It was the era when the business people were able to do to build up their monopolistic power in their industry. For example, John D. Rockefeller was a monopolistic power in oil industry, which is now ExxonMobil and then pretty much all of this oil company in America. The second one is JP Morgan that you see today. These days you see JP Morgan Chase as well as Morgan Stanley. That came from this guy. And then Andrew Carnegie that you see over here, that's US Steel, right? Monopoly power. And then the next one is Cornelius Vanderbilt. He's was a monopolistic power in railroad industry. And the Guggenheim, Meyer Guggenheim was there as well in different industries. Anyway, so that was the era of monopolistic power, and in terms of income among people, it was bipolarization period. So much so that the rich got a lot more richer, and then the poor got a lot poorer. That was this period until 1914.